Good morning. Welcome into the Out of Bounds show on ESPN 1059 The Zone. Super excited about our next guest, and the show is driven by your next Ford F-150, pre-owned or new, at Mack Hike Ford, I-55 North in Jackson. They have the best selection of Ford F-150s in the Southeast. Mack Hike Ford, I-55 North in Jackson. We're live in the BankPlus Studio, and our guests join us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. And we want to welcome in longtime New York Yankees and Atlanta Braves play-by-play guy. He joins us again on the show. He is John Sterling. John Sterling, good morning. How are you?
Well, I'm fine, Bo. One thing interests me, you said Atlanta Braves. I wouldn't think you're old enough to remember that I was with the Braves. I was in the 80s. It was great. This is going to be my 36th year with the Yanks.
So I turned 50 in November, John, and we're about a 5.5 to 6 hour drive from Atlanta. We have the Mississippi Braves here, AA affiliate. And in 1983, at 10 years old, I was upset. We had WTBS in our house and WGN. So I was glued to the Braves and the Cubs. And I thought that Dale Murphy, Bob Horner, Claudell Washington, Bruce Benedict, Glenn Hubbard, Bedrock, among others, I thought they walked on water. John Sterling.
Well, when you're that, I agree with you about that. When you embrace baseball at that early an age, I could name the names of the guys who I grew up to, and I loved the baseball names. I thought were so different. And but you named all the Braves. I had a wonderful time. I was there 5 years with and a part of 6 year too with Pete and Skip and Ernie, and it was a blessing. I loved it.
Man, so my dad, our family went over to Fulton County Stadium for the first time in 83 or 4. And for a kid from Jackson, Mississippi, it was a big deal because Murphy was,
I bet.
Yeah, you get it. You know, when you're 10 years old, you're like, so I still make fun of myself. I wore my All-Star baseball uniform to Fulton County Stadium with my sweatbands, John Sterling, because I was so excited to go see Dale Murphy and Bob Horner play.
Well, I love it. And they're two really good guys, too. Dale Murphy, just as great as advertised, and Bob Horner was really a good guy, too.
Tell me.
They're not dead. They're still good guys, but then when I knew them.
So we've had Murph, what a treat for me later, as somebody who I thought walked on water and was a 2-time NL MVP, and I had all his baseball cards along with Horner's and everybody else's because I was big into Fleer and Donruss and Topps cards. But we've had Murph on the show, I don't know, 6 to 8 times, and he's such a nice guy. What was it like to cover Bob Horner when he was at the Braves and you were at the Braves?
Well, I like offensive players, and he was a terrific offensive player. He had a great swing. And Horner and I also shared something in common. We loved, in all these different cities, to go to the best restaurant. So in that way, I got along beautifully with Bob and obviously with Murph. And I wish I could tell you more. I mean, it was, I had waited a long time. I had done other sports. I had done basketball and football and hockey, but I wanted to do baseball. Little did I realize I would do it till the cows come home. But that was a big thing for me. My first year was '83, and really everything about it was great. I mean, I guess people talk more about the 19-inning game on July 4th, my birthday on what was it, 85 or 86? Anyway,
yeah.
It was that famous 19-inning game that lasted till 4 a.m.
What was it like during that time to call so many games at night, John, and then go into Wrigley and call day games?
Well, it was a little tough the next day because you could stay out a whole long time in Chicago. But, I was so much younger, first of all. First of all, '83. That's 40 years ago. So I was 40 years younger. So, everything was a little different then, but very exciting because it was my first year. And I had waited to do this sport that I adored. I mean, I grew up at the right time with the Yankees when they won every year or almost every year. Anyway, I wish I could come up with great memories for you about Atlanta. I'll tell you one thing. Bob Horner once hit 4 home runs in a game.
Wow.
And I did against Montreal on a Sunday. And I called one on radio and one on TV. But I had to go downstairs in the 9th inning to do the star of the game. I was the junior partner of the 4. And Horner hit his 4th home run, and I was kind of edged into between the alleyway and the dugout and the tunnel in the dugout, as they call them. And Bob Horner hit the 4th home run and practically ran into my arms. And so he was obviously the star of the game.
That's great. John Sterling, play-by-play for the New York Yankees since 1989 and was with the Braves before that. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. All right, so the Yankees, what, real quick, Harry Carey. Do you have, obviously during the 80s, Harry Carey's calling Cubs games, you're both in the NL. Do you have a time when you spent a little time with Harry Carey or a story about meeting him or anything like that, John?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was really buddies with Skip, his son. So, just because of that, I became friends with Harry. I think Harry told me something which is really true. And he said to me once, he said, all the guys are good. He said, we just have different styles. And, of course, I have as different a style as anyone, so I think that's great. And I agree with Harry about that. Everyone is good. Everyone cares. And we just have different styles.
Who did you look up to?
No.
So you've lived the dream doing this. I know it's work too, and lots of travel.
You keep on bringing up the age of 10. I think I decided when I was 10 or 11 I was going on the air.
I love it.
And so I never had to worry about school, which is a good thing. I was a terrible student. And I knew I was going on the air. And then I finally got my first job, $60 a week, way upstate New York. And February 1st, which is now 3 weeks from today or so, February 1st will mark my 64th year on the air, which really is amazing if you think about it.
It is.
And to be gainfully employed at my age is unbelievable. So, I have nothing but I have no kicks. I've been very fortunate.
When you obviously wanted the Yankees gig, you're with the Braves, you're in MLB, which has to be amazing. When you get the call, how did this come about? When you get the call to become the New York Yankees, the biggest franchise in MLB and one of the biggest sports franchises in North America, how did that come about, John?
Well, it really is a story, and I'll tell it to you now. You asked the right question. Got to give you credit for that. I was in Atlanta, and don't forget, I was the Hawks broadcaster all those years. I never missed a Hawks game. In fact, for my first Hawks game, which would have been the beginning of November in '81, I didn't miss a game till middle July 2019. And you know what? No one cares. It's not important, but it's a phenomenal amount of games. And anyway, I came home one afternoon. Excuse me for a minute. Excuse me. I didn't want to cough on the air. I got a phone call from a guy who's become a friend, Steve Malsberg, who was then a producer at ABC in New York, WABC. And they owned the rights for like 10 years, and 2 years were up. And he said to me, would you like to do the Yankee games? And I said, well, yeah, I've got to keep the Hawks. Imagine saying that. And And I said to him, he said, we have a new general manager. He's come in this year. He hates the broadcast, and this is the end of the broadcast. And I said, well, does he know who I am? He said, he said he's been watching and listening to you. Don't forget, in the 70s, I was in New York. I did a 3-hour talk show and a lot of play-by-play in football, basketball, and hockey. And then he could hear me, obviously, on TBS. So he said, yeah, he's a big fan of yours. So I didn't have an agent, and I called up a buddy of mine who was a lawyer, and he had been a college basketball player, college and pro referee, and then my broadcast partner on the Nets for a few years. His name was Mike DiTomaso. And so I called up Mike, and I said, we'd call this guy and see if you can make a deal. Do you know, he called me back in a day or so, we have a deal. I got hired by the Yankees without an audition.
Wow.
When I was really young, I mean 22, 23, I auditioned for a show in Providence on a radio station, morning rock show. And I had 4 auditions. For Providence, I didn't have an audition for the Yankees. It's been 36 years.
Gah. Okay, so you get the job of a lifetime, and George Steinbrenner is there. Now, there's a tie to Mississippi in about and you may correct me here, like 1991 or 2. Buck Showalter, who played at Mississippi State under Ron Polk, and we've had on the show, and we know Buck is the manager. And I guess like just about every manager, it was oil and water. Buck was close to getting it, getting over the hump, and then Torrey comes in, and it's an unbelievable run. But what was it like because Buck's, pretty hard-headed too, and got an ego, and I like him a lot. But what was it like to watch Buck Showalter and George Steinbrenner work together or tie up, John?
Well, George was so great to me. I have a lot of George Steinbrenner stories. I mean, he was first of all in Fort Lauderdale in March of '89. I get on the elevator, going down to dinner with people, and who's on the elevator? George, and we're alone. And George said to me, "I just want you to know, I always wanted you to do the Yankee games." And I was snowed, and then a few years later, the Yankees were awful, and he was getting really knocked. And I said on the air, which he must have heard, I said, they keep on knocking George Steinbrenner, and they keep on knocking the general manager. Why don't they knock the players? They're the ones who are losing and not scoring. And then a few days later in Milwaukee, during a rain delay, I was walking around, nothing to do, and we sent it back to the station where there were talkers on ABC. And George stopped me. He was friends with Selig, and he was in a box in Milwaukee, and he said to me, "John, I just want you to know, you'll always do the Yankees, and if they try to replace you, I'll veto it." So that my relationship with George. Now, Michael Kay and Susan as well, we got to be tremendous friends with Buck Showalter. I mean, we were like his crew, and it was great to watch him because he's so on top of everything. He's so committed. He works so hard at it. And I have a good Buck story to tell you. After the game, he'll watch the games 2 or 3 times.
Wow.
I mean, this guy is committed. And we're in Detroit in the old ballpark. And he's there until like 1 a.m. watching the games. And he says to the clubhouse director or whatever that is, they call him Clubby. And he said to the Clubby, "Can I walk back to the hotel?" And the Clubby said to him, yeah, you can walk back. You won't make it. He said, I'll get you a cab. So anyway, it was a wonderful time, and like that, Buck and George. And when the Yankees lost the 95 series, one of the greatest series I've ever done in any sport, but they lost in the last game. And to get to the bus, which was in center field, you had to go through the dugout and walk across the field. And after my post game, I'm alone coming downstairs, and there's George standing on the field. The proverbial steam is coming out of his ears. And I walked past him, and he said to me, "Don't worry, there'll be changes. Not you and Michael. You guys are great." So that's what I think of George Steinbrenner. And Buck and all the three of us, Michael, Susan, and myself, are still buddies with Buck Showalter after all this time.
Wow. John Sterling, play-by-play for the Yankees since 1989 and the Atlanta Braves before that. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. So you mentioned you were close to George Steinbrenner. Y'all had a great relationship. Talk about his drive. And, a lot of times people paint him as, I don't know, a maniac or whatever, but he had this drive and will for greatness, and he drove the Yankees. The 80s were not kind to the Yankees, but the 90s and 2000s damn sure were. Talk about his drive and will.
Well, in Atlanta, I realized that the Yankees had a hell of a team in the 80s, but they didn't have the playoffs then that they have now. If they had, they would have made the playoffs every year. Who knows what would have happened? But anyway, George, you can't be more committed to anything. The John McMullen's great line, he had owned the Astros and the New Jersey Devils, and he had been a limited partner of George Steinbrenner's, and he said there's nothing as limited as being a limited partner of George Steinbrenner. So, but he was a very driven guy, and he made sure his team had the best. And when Joe Torre, who was a friend of mine, good friend of mine, became manager in '96, Joe said, it was phenomenal to work for a guy who would do anything to help you win and not worry about the costs. Mm-hmm. And, George Steinbrenner did a lot for baseball. I mean, he told them when free agency came in, it'd be the beginning of baseball. He said, it'll be the end. These guys don't make so much money. Well, they're making a fortune, and baseball's never been bigger. So that was George showed how to make money with a franchise, too. So I'm sorry I have to leave you. I do have to run. Bo, thank you very much for having me on your show.
John Sterling, we enjoyed it. We appreciate it. I hope you have a great day.
Well, thank you, sir. You too. Appreciate it.
John Sterling, play-by-play for the Braves, Hawks, and Yankees. He joined us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line and got to call some of the greats, including Derek Jeter in that run under Torre and Steinbrenner, where they knocked down several World Series championships. The show is driven by your next Ford F-150 truck, pre-owned or new. Go see our friends, our guys at Mack Hike Ford, I-55 North in Jackson. They'll take care of you and your family.